30th, 2018 work session of the Portland City Council. Today we're here to talk about the Paul bump. Before I turn this over to Jessica and her very able team, I have just some brief opening remarks. First of all, I want to thank not only my colleagues, but I want to thank our budget advisors for being here again. They are citizen volunteers, and they spend a tremendous amount of time working with us to help advise us and give a community perspective on our budgets. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate your participation and your active engagement. So thanks everybody for being here. My plan for this morning is to review the proposed fall supplemental budget, also known as the bump, the fall bump, and answer any questions that you may have, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time for discussion and questions from our community budget advisors as well. As you are aware, the fall bump is primarily meant to address technical adjustments to true up budgets between fiscal years. Bureaus may also appropriate new resources or request general fund contingency for urgent or unforeseen needs that cannot be accommodated within their current year budget. Due to the existence of potential large liabilities occurring over the next 18 months, however, CBO has advised us, and I've agreed, to retain as much general fund contingency as possible in the proposed bump. Therefore, as an exercise of fiscal responsibility, the proposed bump decisions leave approximately $4.1 million in unrestricted contingency to address these outstanding liabilities. Because of the need to cover these outstanding liabilities, there are items that I also wanted to fund in the fall bump but chose not to in order to preserve as much contingency as possible for those liabilities. I'm instead directing my bureaus to prioritize these costs within their existing budgets. And just to give you a couple of examples, as you're aware, trash cleanup is very important to me. There's a program that's been proposed through SOLVE. We will fund that, but we will fund it out of existing contingency. The Portland Police Bureau PIO, they had requested funds, and we are asking them to find the funds within their existing communications budget. And the Portland Building Child Care Center has also been put into a similar circumstance, or they're asking them to find the funding for that within the existing budget. There were a lot of requests that my colleagues made that are very good requests. They're very important requests. Many I wanted to fund, but we chose not to at this time, not knowing the full amount of the anticipated liabilities that we might incur. So this is our best effort. I'm looking forward to dialoguing about the proposed bump and happy to answer any questions that people might have. In the meanwhile, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, who is the interim director of the City Budget Office. And Jessica, again, I want to thank you personally and publicly for stepping forward to be the interim director. You did not anticipate doing that, and it's a very challenging time of year, but we're appreciative that you do that. So you'll start off the process by walking us through the proposed fall bump. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. It's my pleasure and my privilege to get to serve you all in the city in this capacity. Good morning, Mayor, members of Council, and community budget advisors. My name is Jessica Kennard. I'm the interim budget director. I'm here today with Jane Marie Ford, our bump coordinator, and we are going to walk through the Mayor's proposed bump ordinance. So there are a lot of papers in front of you. In terms of a brief run of show, what we're going to walk through first is the excess contingency balance, which are these tables. We're then going to walk through the general fund reconciliation, which many members of, I believe you all are familiar with. It's this document with the orange headers that talks about our general fund requests and decisions. We're going to talk about capital set aside, which has a blue banner across the top. We're going to talk a little bit about Cal target adjustments in the fall bump that will affect the 1920 budget development process. We're going to talk briefly about some notable non-general fund issues, and finally we'll finish with some positions. I want to encourage members of council and our community budget advisors to jump in at any time with questions, and we can have a discussion as we go along. We'll also have time at the very end to have a more robust discussion if folks want. So without further ado, let's take a look at our excess balance, contingency balance. So this is the sheet with gray and white table in the top. And so there's, we start with sort of the ending balance that we know about via the CAFR, which was $58.2 million. We make a series of technical adjustments and adjustments per financial policy to that number, and then subtract out what we budgeted as part of our beginning fund balance, and we're left with an excess balance of available general fund, which is the bottom bolded line at in this first table of $7.8 million. So that's our excess balance that we have to work with of general fund. Per financial policy, that money is divided in half. Half of that balance goes into the capital set-aside account, so $3.9 million is going towards capital major maintenance allocations in the fall bump, and the other half goes to our unrestricted contingency account. So if you look at the second box down here that says contingency balances, we started the year with a budget of $2.5 million of unrestricted general fund contingency. We're adding that $3.9 million plus a small return to the general fund, and we end up with $6.4 million. And then the mayor's proposed bump decisions, which we'll walk through shortly, allocate to approximately $2.3 million. So then we're left with a remaining balance in the mayor's proposed of $4.1 million of unrestricted general fund contingency to deal with future unforeseen needs and some of the liabilities that the mayor alluded to. Any questions on the contingency sheet? Okay. So let's move right into our general fund reconciliation. We're starting with capital set aside, actually, so I'm going to go ahead and have you guys pull up this, the table with the blue header. As many of you know, the capital set aside is, again, per council financial policy, we allocate 50% of funds towards our major maintenance and infrastructure improvement needs, and these are in the areas of parks, transportation, and emergency preparedness. Projects are scored and ranked by folks from the City Asset Manager Group, and they're ranked based on the likelihood and consequences of asset failure across a handful of areas. So what you see in front of you are the 21 projects that were submitted for funding, totaling $85 million in funding requests from a variety of bureaus. And then on the far right is the validated score using this methodology and the score from the City Asset Managers Group. A higher score indicates a higher risk and likelihood and consequences of asset failure across the areas of health and safety, service impacts, legal and regulatory risk, and environmental impacts, among other factors. So what is included in the mayor's proposed bump goes in line with the scoring system and includes the top two projects, which are two projects in the Portland Bureau of Transportation, the citywide lamp replacement program, which are the lights within traffic signals, the pedestrian and traffic lights, and then also traffic signal reconstruction program. Both of these programs are significant need in the Bureau of Transportation, and the risk and consequence of failure is large of those.
Could I ask you a question on this, Jessica? I'd had a number of conversations with my colleagues who have urgent projects that are farther down the list.
Yep.
That are routinely put forward as important projects. Commissioner Fish and I, for example, had discussed the ongoing deterioration of the road up to Pittock Mansion. Yep. And I'm in agreement with Commissioner Fish that that is a very important asset for the city of Portland. We are singularly responsible for the maintenance of that road. In the event that that road washes out, it would have, I think, a very detrimental impact to the travel and tourism of this community. But that project will probably never be ranked in the top 5. Do we have the right ranking system here?
It's a great question. We're actually in the progress, the City Budget Office is in the process of working with the Asset Managers Group to take another look and reevaluate our methodology. I think one of the challenges that we've realized with the current methodology is it sort of incentivizes folks to bring forward those projects that are most imminently at risk of complete failure, which pits projects against each other that we inevitably can't fund all of them, but which have very dire consequences. When in fact, as part of our asset management strategy, those are the projects that bureaus should be trying to prioritize managing within their existing resources where possible, and sort of balance out some of the other characteristics.
And I'm sorry to cut you off, Jessica. Commissioner Fish and I had a number of conversations, and he will notice that his project did not make the list, and so that's why I want to have this conversation, because I do agree with him that we need to have a strategy, and we need to start putting funds away now, or creating a contingency pool or a potential bond fund that could help us begin to fund these things. My concern is if we're simply waiting for something to break, we're not taking into account the relative cost of fixing what is broken. If there's a significant washout, for example, and I'll just keep using the same example of the road up to Pittock Mansion. It's a steep, windy road. I believe, I'm no expert, but I believe that is probably a slide area, or a potential slide area, just based on the number of slides I've seen on Burnside. And once it happens, the cost will be very, very large, as opposed to incremental maintenance along the way that might make that cost relatively manageable. I'm not sure our process really captures that trade-off.
Yeah. I think that's right, Mayor. I think it's also important to note that while the capital set-aside program is extremely valuable and important tool in helping us solve some of our major maintenance infrastructure needs, we should acknowledge and recognize that those needs far surpass what we are able to address within this pool of resources, and we need more tools in our toolbox. And so I think that's why, Mayor, you've directed, the important work that the Chief Financial Officer is doing around financial policy. We're looking to enhance our ability to fund infrastructure needs within, particularly our general fund bureaus. So through the budget note that was put forward for parks and others. So we need more tools to address this challenge, and we're working on getting those in line.
And I'll just add one last thing. I'm not being critical of the way it is. I'm just saying this
Absolutely.
might be a good time to revisit it, given the number of projects that are down low on this list that strike me as being things that, a roof replacement. I mean, if you ignore a roof replacement, we all know that can be catastrophic in terms of the consequences. So I just hope we have a broader conversation about this between now and the actual budget process in terms of how we're going to prioritize infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Mayor, can I jump in for 1 sec? So I view the validated score as a guide and not as a scientific exercise. So that's the first thing.
Yes.
And I assume that Portland Bureau of Transportation traffic safety improvement projects are always going to score a little higher because, for the obvious reason that we're talking about life safety and other things. I appreciate the mayor flagging Pittock Mansion, and I go back to, Jessica, what you said earlier about what's the criteria we use, and urgent and unforeseen. Well, this is clearly urgent. And if the street washes out and you cannot access Pittock Mansion, it means the staff can't work there, programs can't go there. It has a significant impact, which is why we have asked for 5, but we'd settle for 1. $1 million allows us to begin the project. And what I will be advocating for in this bump is $1 million, which is a down payment. We can figure out how to pay for the rest. But I'm advised by the director that with $1 million, we can get started on this and do some basic shoring up. And so that's what my ask is going to be. I think revisiting the scoring, just so we all understand what are the factors, and I think is important. But again, my guess is that Pittock Mansion will always, fall short of some of these other particularly compelling Portland Bureau of Transportation. We could adopt a rule, Mayor, that just says that if you are not present for the fall bump work session, you're not eligible for any.
Must be present to win.
You must be present to win. We could, I don't know, that seems fair. This is a 9 o'clock meeting. Commissioner Fritz and I have other things we could be doing. But that's, so we will be asking for $1 million and seeing if there are 3 votes to reallocate so that we can get and I have a letter dated something 2017 from Marta Bonas at Pittock explaining the dire need for us to get started on this. So I think we fit within the criteria. It's just a question of whether what the council's appetite is in terms of the money. And I view it as my obligation to at least make the ask and see if I can get 3 votes.
Fantastic.
So I just want to comment. First, I'm disappointed we don't have the Office of Equity and Human Rights Director, Interim Director at the table. I don't know whether he was invited, but that comes into this. I will have a side note that the council clerk told me that Commissioner Udaley is ill today. She was planning to be here. So I should say that for anybody who might be watching at home. One of the big criteria here is not only cost of failure, it's the consequence of failure and also the equity implications. And so citywide lamp replacement and traffic signals obviously benefits people citywide, including people in East Portland, where the traffic and crash fatality rates are disproportionate. On the equity scale, even within parks, the Peninsula Park Community Centre roof would score better, and probably that's why it's higher than the Pittock Mansion road stabilisation. But as the Mayor just said, the major problem is we don't have enough money to take care of all of the problems that are urgent and crucial and life safety and cost effective. So I certainly want us to continue the policy when we're going to be considering the financial policies in a few weeks, that we continue the practice of dedicating half of the ending fund balance and half of one-time money to major maintenance projects in the 3 most needed bureaus: parks, transportation, and emergency management. And still, we've got to figure out how to catch up with and get ahead of all of these maintenance needs. It's really heartbreaking to have to choose between these really urgent needs, even within bureaus.
Yeah, I also just want to add that one additional detrimental effect of landslides is on steep slopes. They are not controllable, and they continue down onto private property. So to your point, Mayor, about the parade of horribles that happens when you don't take care of certain assets, those will become claims against the city because of where this landslide originates, and it'll cascade down to some unhappy neighbors. So anyway, we're hoping to at least carve out a chunk that allows us to start on this project, and then we can figure out through the regular budget process how to pay for the rest. And by the way, is it just me, or is it hard to hear in this setting? You know, we're so used to being up there. Our citizen budget advisors are okay, so it's just me. Okay. Okay.
Less echoed. It was echoier the last time I thought we had a work session.
We're spoiled when we're up here because we have the screen and we have everything. Here, it just seems harder to hear, but maybe it's just me.
And by the way, this being a work session, everybody just jump in when you feel like it. So if you have a question or whatever, you don't have to wait for me to call. It's a work session, jump in. It's casual.
I do have just a question, because and I'm not defining which your ranking or anything, is that when you talk maintenance capital, and I'm assuming these are capital projects, I'm questioning why a citywide lamp replacement program a capital request versus maintenance that should be being done continually? You know, it seems like lights that have to be changed should be changed continually and not waiting until you have so many that you have to make a capital request for it. It's just a question I ask from a budget standpoint. The school district, we'd see that as changing our lights in our buildings, and we have to change them continually. You know, so it's just something to think about. I know you're changing the strategy around budgeting and stuff, so.
Yes, thanks, Rita. That's a great question. We have actually, I mean, so part of the challenge is that with all of the assets that the city owns, we actually don't have sufficient resources to pay for things like changing the lights, and that's precisely, I think, that what this pool of funding is supposed to get at. But to the mayor and the commissioners' points, we even with this pool of funds, there is much more that's needed to address some of these critical needs. Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to the orange sheet, which is the general fund reconciliation. We're going to walk through the remainder of the general fund packages and decisions. So you'll see that first section is capital set-aside requests, which we just walked through. The second group are encumbrance carryover requests, and so these are requests for funds that were primarily purchase orders and contracts in the prior year that were encumbered. The Bureau asked for those monies back. In all cases, the mayor's proposed includes all encumbrance carryovers with the exception of a few small dollar values where the contracts have either expired, are no longer necessary, or are representing programming that already has funds available in the current year budget. Then with revenue carryover, the next section, in financial policy, we have a number of bureaus that have revenue generating programs that are housed within their general fund. When those programs exceed cost recovery, those funds are carried over into the subsequent fiscal year. So you see two examples of that here with the Office of Community and Civic Life and their cannabis revenue, and with OMF with procurement liquidated damages carryover, a small amount of excess balance that's carried over to the next year. We have one instance where there's money coming back to the general fund. This is for Dodge Park. So we have an annual ongoing allocation to the Water Bureau of $35,000 to support the park amenities at Dodge Park. And then the agreement is that every year they will provide back to us what they collect in terms of fee revenue. And so this is the return of those dollars. Yes.
Thank you. And I've asked the Water Bureau, and I'd like you to partner to look at historically over the last 5 years how much has come back so that we can avoid dedicating $35,000 when we only need $10,000 or whatever it would be, and then make it an ongoing allocation.
Great, that will be much cleaner. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, so moving on to the big section, which is the new requests. This is where much of the discussion often focus. The first item is the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, $188,000 for one-time projects that were started in the prior year for the design overlay zone assessment work. The mayor's proposed includes $118,000 of this, which represents the amount that has been contracted with a third party and work that is undergoing currently. Similarly, they have $35,000 for residential infill project work that was started last year. The project has been extended, I think, due to some further conversations with the Planning and Sustainability Commission. And so that was a $35,000 request that is not included in the proposed budget currently. $50,000 for the Southwest Corridor Southwest Equitable Housing Strategy. So this is a request for the creation of a Southwest Corridor Collaborative Organization to carry out the work of the recently adopted Equitable Housing Strategy that was passed by Council. And that is included in the mayor's proposed. The Commissioner of Public Affairs, there is $25,000 to cover the administrative costs associated with the Gateway Center moving over to the county, which is something that's occurring during the fall bump. And that is a one-time cost, but there's a flag that, as we move over to the county, there's continued conversations with the county about the administrative costs associated with running that program.
Jessica, there's 4 examples in the sheet we have in front of us where it's listed as zero bureau request, but the mayor's proposed has funds. So
yes.
For someone that is puzzled by that, could you explain just how that ends up that way?
Absolutely. So so the bureau request column represents what bureaus submitted way back in the beginning of September with their requested budgets. Many conversations ensued since that time, and additional requests came forward later in the process, either by a commissioner's office or by a bureau or a special appropriations. And so the $0 represents the fact that that package did not exist at the time that bureaus submitted back in September, but was sort of born out of the conversations that happened later.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Gateway Center, that's the one at 102nd and Burnside? Okay, I wanted to verify that's what it was.
So, all right. All right, next is the Office for Community Technology. So the Office of Community Technology via a budget note was requested to move outside of the Bureau of Revenue and Financial Services and start as its own independent office. This request for new resources are primarily for one-time resources to fund relocation from the revenue decision. What's included in the mayor's proposed includes a consultant requested funds for a strategic plan for legal counsel and funding for a new director position.
That's not enough. The CBO recommended 600,000, and it's only 175.
So I believe that what the mayor's office, what the mayor's proposed includes, assumes that they will physically not relocate, that they will physically stay within their current location, although we're technically creating them as a new office, and then the relocation will occur at a later time. So many of the costs that were recommended by City Budget Office were associated with one-time move costs.
I am concerned about that.
Okay.
I thought that the City Budget Office's analysis made sense. So I'd like some more conversation, Mayor, about that particular allocation, because it's been dragging on for a very long time. And I disagreed with the City Budget Office in saying that we should upgrade the manager to the director and not have a deputy director. I think with the two sides of the Office of Community Technology, there really does need to be a deputy director, and so I would support moving the manager into the deputy director, but then creating a director position. And it seems like 175 to do all of that with the contract is not sufficient.
Katie Shifley, City Budget Office. I would just also add that as part of the mayor's proposed, it includes a CAL adjustment of, I think it's about $191,000 to fully fund the director position on an ongoing basis. So the 175 is just for 6 months of the current fiscal year for supporting that position, and it's fully funded on an ongoing basis, which would keep that current OCT manager position that's currently vacant available to be upclassed,
Thank you. So could you afterwards give me a breakdown of what that 175 would buy, and then
Absolutely.
What would not be funded in what you had recommended? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next is the Office of Community and Civic Life, the Census 2020 Coordination and Response. So this is a request to fund community intermediary organizations that will serve hard-to-count populations and help ensure that the next census count tries to reach those hard-to-count populations. It also will fund a half-time position within Civic Life to help coordinate that work. And what is included in the mayor's proposed is a portion of that request at $100,000.
And again, what would that fund? Because I agreed with your analysis that we need to figure out the coordination with the other jurisdictions before we do the move forward with it, and why it wouldn't be in the regular budget rather than in the bump.
So that's a great question. I think there was some conversation about the need to get started now, and I think that the $100,000 was a round figure that was sort of provided just to get the work started as a first stab, but continuing the conversation as we go into budget development and seeing really what's a more robust package that can be brought forward as part of the full next budget process.
So again, if you could tell me later what that 100,000 is for, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So the next package is the continuation of the Portlanders United Against Hate position. That position was funded partially through the year with the original plan to have the pilot work be completed, I believe, in February. There have been a few delays to the project, and so they're planning on finishing it shortly thereafter, but they want to be sure that the position continues through the end of the fiscal year. So this $18,000 will ensure that the position will be funded through the fiscal year.
And why is that unforeseen? Why hasn't we allocated money that was supposed to last the whole year?
The unforeseen nature of it is the delay. So I think in budget development, the Bureau requested the amount to cover for the full year, and the City Budget Office recommended that the funding be provided just for the duration of the pilot, which was scheduled to end in February. And so only funding was provided through February because that was the original deadline for the end of the program.
But it's had a delay, so shouldn't the money still be available if it hasn't been put into process yet?
The money from March through the end of the fiscal year was never allocated to Civic Life.
Right, but the project has been delayed, so the money that we've already allocated hasn't presumably been spent yet.
So, let's see. So I think the money was provided on sort of a 9-month basis with the intention of, there was only 9 months of funding provided. The money that was not allocated fell to balance last year, right? So there was a delay so it would have reaped savings in the last fiscal year, but that would have fallen to general fund balance. I think, and to your point, because of sort of the urgent unforeseen and the smaller dollar value associated with this package, CBO actually did not recommend this package, but I think it was deemed a priority area for the mayor, given the current environment around hate speech. And so there was a decision to fund both this package and the Portlanders United Against Hate special appropriations package in his proposed budget.
So was it a mistake that the money wasn't carried over?
I think at the time, it was a timing issue because at the time of the spring bump, we didn't know that the carryover was going to be needed. I think to be more conservative, we could have allocated the full year's amount in budget development to ensure, in the case that if there was a delay, that they would have enough funding to continue.
So we're being asked to allocate more money even though the pilot and the results aren't in yet?
Correct.
Thank you.
And this will come up again with another package in special appropriations. And then, so the next package is for a database, to upgrade the $20,000 in Civic Life to upgrade FileMaker database for information and referral services. The database is not compatible with Windows 10, which the city is in the process of upgrading to. Then the next package is one that you will see in a series of packages related to procurement. There's a handful of packages here that all have to do with the reorganization of procurement services, and they all net to zero. So there's some positive values on general fund bureau side, and then there's a negative value that you'll see in the procurement division a couple of lines down. This is Office of Management and Finance Procurement Division reorganization. And so what's happening here is the procurement division has recognized a need for more focused services for infrastructure bureaus around construction contracting. And so what the procurement division is proposing to do, and they've done a lot of stakeholder engagement and gotten the buy-in of all of their customer bureaus, is reorganize a portion of their work to pull the folks, there's 6 folks that currently are funded by the overhead model, pull them out of the overhead model and have them provide dedicated service to certain bureaus that have large contract needs with relation to capital construction and be funded directly by interagency agreements. And so by pulling those staff out of the overhead model, they actually generate savings for the general fund and for overhead paying bureaus that are then redeployed and directly provided to general fund bureaus to pay for those interagency agreements, and then the overhead bureaus will also receive a true up of funds that they will pay directly through interagency agreements. As part of this reorganization, procurement is also expanding their work, again, in relation to understanding the needs of our capital bureaus. So I think they're adding about 6.75 FTE to also to really focus and provide a higher level of service to those bureaus. So I skipped over briefly, there's between the 2 procurement items, there's the 311 business ops in Office of Management and Finance, and that's a request for funding for a 2-year limited term position that would support the development and implementation of 311, specifically the customer service desk implementation in the Portland building. Moving down now to the item below the procurement reorg, which is the CEO surtax. This is a request for half of a position to work for work associated with the CEO surtax going into effect. Next, there's the rental registration program in BRFS. So this is a request for 3 positions for half a year and materials and services to roll out the rental registration program. This request is fully funded in the mayor's proposed and at a level of $273,000. Then there is the OCT impact, which is a request for funding to offset the overhead costs previously charged to OCT. That is not included. Neither is the Business Solutions Manager, which is request for funding to offset costs previously charged to the Water Bureau. The Water Bureau has decided to move their internal processes and collections related to their water billing system, Cayenta, outside of BRFS. And as a result, BRFS is no longer receiving funding for those services, and they're not receiving overhead payments. So they're requesting to be reimbursed for that whole, and that is not included in the current mayor's proposed. The next item is an ITS carryover, the integrated tax system carryover. That's a request to carry over funding for the integrated tax system requirements development. We need a new integrated tax system. And this is a discrete 3-year project. So it's sort of the carryover of an originally allocated funding for essentially for the 3-year term of that project, and that's included. The next item is the Mitigate Cayenta billing transfer. This is the similar issue that I just stated around the Water Bureau now taking ownership over the revenue collection aspect of its water billing system, and OMF no longer receiving overhead costs as a result of losing that function. Then there's the Child Care Center. And that's the one that the mayor's office, the mayor alluded to earlier in his introduction, that as part of the Portland Building Reconstruction Project, there's a desire to reconstruct the child care center on the first floor, and the Bureau is being asked to absorb that work.
Before you move on, Jessica, I don't see the Community Opportunities and Enhancement Program contract management in this list as either funded or not funded.
Okay, thank you.
That's actually embedded in the procurement request in general. So you see what shows up as the procurement package. I'm looking up for the exact one here. I don't see it right away. Yeah, this procurement division reorganization, it's embedded within that package. It doesn't show up on this particular form because it's not actually general fund funded. It's funded with external revenue from this sort of miscellaneous revenue, like from the 1% of all public improvement projects.
So it is funded?
It is. It's funded with kind of a note to the revenue division saying, I'm sorry, to the procurement division saying, this resource hasn't been fully established yet, but conditional upon it actually being there, you know, it's recommended and included.
So I just want to note that we haven't, as a council, made the decision as to whether Prosper or procurement is going to manage that program. The council directed that it was going to be in procurement previously. So then this position that's funded but doesn't show up would actually be done from the 1% should it stay in procurement. Is that correct? Am I understanding you?
I think so. I believe it would be funded from that resource, whether it's in procurement or Prosper.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. All right, next, we are now on to Portland Bureau of Transportation General Fund request. This is a $2.5 million request. That's actually for 7 discrete projects. What is included, the $260,000 that's included, is for safety guards on city trucks. And this is a Vision Zero initiative to protect against fatalities and injury that occurs with city trucks. What is not included in the mayor's proposed and was also requested is funding for Best NATO, a water transit study, Adaptive Bike Town, South Portland Address Project, and a resilience and recovery plan. let's see. So the next item is station Wi-Fi at the Fire Bureau. This is a project that was actually funded out of Public Safety Project Reserve funds, and it was funded in the adopted budget, and subsequent information from BTS has increased the cost of the project, but this will be funded also out of Public Safety Reserve funds, so this is not, this $60,000 is not actually a general fund contingency impact. Next is the Portland Fire Rescue share of the procurement costs. Then the Portland Housing Bureau, general fund requests. So this is related to two items. One is, and this is included in the mayor's proposed, a pilot records expungement program to reduce the barriers to housing. This was passed by council through ordinance, and a fair market rent study to potentially improve and impact our Section 8 voucher values. Yes.
Didn't Metro with Home Forward just recently do a study on rents? So what makes this different?
There was the study 3 years ago.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Jane Marie Ford, City Budget Office. So yeah, so 3 years ago, this was funded in the fall bump. It was right after the state of housing emergency had been passed. I am not familiar with the Metro one, but if it's, I have looked at a lot of Metro studies. It's what I'm thinking of. It's more. It was Home Forward, yeah. So it's been, yes, it's 3 years. This is the update now. So looking forward to 2019.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
and it's being funded by other jurisdictions as well. This is the City of Portland portion.
So it's one that tries to get the feds to bump up.
Correct, correct.
Frida, this is one I actually was going to defer to the budget process, but as was just hinted at, we're the final closers for a number of other jurisdictions that have already put their money into the pot. So that was the tipping point for me. I was content to let this one wait till the budget process.
No, I'm fine with it. It was just a question, and 3 years goes back real fast. I just remember them doing the other study, and so it's kind of curious. Yeah.
All right, and so let's see, where are we now? Oh, we're Parks and Recreation. So this first package, Penn 1 Drainage Master Plan, is planning costs associated with developing a drainage plan near Delta Park in concert with BES. That is not included. The next item is Interstate Firehouse Cultural Center. This is community engagement and planning of how to use the Interstate Firehouse Cultural Center. Parks Native American Technical. Yes, absolutely.
I was just struck by all the zeros here. Mayor, my understanding, we got lobbied on the Interstate Firehouse Cultural Center issue, and actually we were told that your office was in favor of continuing that process, and we're going to budget $50,000. What tipped the scales there?
The uncertainty around the question of class comp. I'm definitely supportive of the Interstate Firehouse Cultural Center. I want to see it funded. But I'm holding all of our chips, as many as we possibly can, for the unforeseen liability. We don't know what it is yet. I wish we did. At a minimum, I want to see this back in the budget process. I think it's a great project, but along with all the other zeros, I'm holding off till I know what that unfunded liability is.
Okay. The next item is Native American Technical Assistant. This is money for consultant work to improve tribal relations.
I'm sorry, I said class comp. I meant pay equity. Yeah. I apologize.
Right.
I'm in a room. I'm in a room full of very, very smart people.
To improve tribal relations with the Parks Bureau. The next item is technology upgrades, also with Parks for closed-circuit televisions and network improvements at the community centers. The next item is the procurement share of funding for the Parks Bureau. So the funding that's included is the offset to the increased costs that we expect them to incur as a result of now having to pay directly an IA to procurement for their capital contract work. Finally, the last Parks item is Ranger and Street Tree carryover, and this is carryover from the previous fiscal year for seasonal Ranger funding and the Street Tree Task Force. Next, we have the Police Bureau, almost $1.7 million of non-discretionary carryover. This is a request to carry over and reallocate revenue that was generated by the Traffic Division and the Alarms Program. This money, in contrast to the other revenue carryovers that we saw before, is not for a discrete cost recovery program, and it is not included in the mayor's proposed. Prosper Portland has $75,000 in the mayor's proposed for the continuation of work begun last year around the HILPLOC and FAR study. Prosper submitted a request for $26,000 to administer the funding that they received this year for cannabis fund grants. That's not included in the proposed. They also submitted a request for $180,000 to provide employment and business services during construction of the new bus rapid transit line on Southeast Division Street. They submitted a request, and it is included in the mayor's proposed, to set up a training center for welders dependent on needs analysis, for welders dependent on needs analysis, and that's on Swan Island.
To echo Commissioner Fisher's question, why did you decide to fund that when the Budget Office said there's not yet a clear need for it and we should consider it in the regular budget?
And I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt. I failed to mention that this is actually set aside. The mayor's office asked us to set this aside in contingency. And so it's not allocated at this time, but it was, I think there were some subsequent decisions, discussions that the mayor's office had that made them want this available when the time came.
It seems to me it should be more in the
I'm happy to. I mean, I'm happy to hold this off until the budget. That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
Why is the Hill block in two different spots? There's a 75 and then there's a new 100,000.
So the first item was a carryover from work that had been allocated during the spring bump last year. The second item is a new request for additional staff resources to work on the Hill Block project. The next two items are items that were also approved last year by council, and this just represents actually the carryover. The funds were unable to be contracted before the end of the fiscal year, so they fell to balance and they need to be reappropriated, but they've already been approved by council. That's the Portland Gay Men's Chorus and the Creative Laureate. Next is the Portlanders United Against Hate continuation. This is a request to expand and extend the construction of the hate incident tracking tool. And that is included in the proposed budget. The next item is funding to support program facilitators for best practices with the COCO PSEP, which includes transportation, professional development, stipends, a food budget, and community building activities for the participants in that work group. The next item was a request to fill a market gap for financing tools for individuals who want to develop accessory dwelling units. That was a request for $2.1 million in special appropriations. That's not included in the proposed. Next is also another technical adjustment. This was actually one of the projects that was awarded a competitive grant last year, Amplify Northwest. But they had a name change that occurred, and there were some other barriers to getting into contract before the end of the fiscal year. So this just represents the award that was provided last year that needs to be rebudgeted this year. Then we've got the Anderson lawsuit. So we have, as you all know, we have one of our looming liabilities is the need to pay the Anderson settlement as of September of next fall. We have an opportunity to take care of that liability right now in the fall bump. The unfunded portion is $6.6 million. We have $6.3 million coming back to the city via the Comcast settlement, and the city budget office's recommendation is to take that money and set it aside for the payment, supplement it with the missing $300,000 $300,000 in contingency, and then that will actually free up for council $400,000 in ongoing general fund during the budget development process that we had set aside to finance this effort. So that is included in the mayor's office has agreed with our recommendation and has put that in his proposed budget. The next item is the ceasefire program with OYVP. This is funding, it's with the goal of reducing gun-related violence by enhancing service delivery out of the Portland Street level gang outreach and the gift coordinator grant programs. And specifically, this funding is supporting a life coach in addition to some other enhancements.
Did we approve that in the budget?
This was in the adopted budget or in the requested bump?
In the adopted budget. And if not, why didn't it go through the special appropriations process that's in process right now?
So Asha might be able to speak to this, but there's funding for the overall program. This is a specific piece of funding that they're expecting is going to, it's grant funding that they're expecting is no longer going to be available as of January. Is that right, Asha?
I'm sorry. Good morning, Asha Bell-Dubose for the record. And this wasn't in the normal budget cycle. The request came in after, so that's why it's not seen in there. And it's a one-time request for 2 fiscal years.
Why didn't it go through the special appropriations process? That's, currently we allocate a certain amount so that we don't get outside requests like this coming in a bump.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. This request, it just came in. It didn't go through the competitive grant cycle. The cycle actually closed before the request came in, and I believe this was an outcome of work that has been going on between the street-level gang outreach program and the Office of Youth Violence Prevention and another program in the city of Oakland. And basically, through their negotiations, they decided that this is the best way to operationalize the program to reduce street-level gang violence in Portland. And based on the timing, that's when the request came in.
This is actually a kind of a sub-program of the Office of Youth Violence Prevention.
Yes. So
Got it.
right, it's an expansion of those programs.
Thank you.
All right, we got through it. We're almost done. Program carryover requests. So there are a couple of items, and what we're classifying as program carryovers are only those items which were taken out of last year's budget during the over expenditure ordinance and now from a technical perspective, just need to be put right back into this year's budget. And there are 2 items, the executive recruitment program carryover with BHR and a program carryover with the mayor's office. Again, these were already approved during the over expenditure ordinance of last year. And then there's a series of technical adjustments that are mandated by council ordinance or another legal agreement, such as the police bureau contract or the short-term revenue ordinance. So when all that is said and done, what that leaves us with again is a balance of $4.14 million in unrestricted contingency. A number of those requests and the requests that are included in the mayor's proposed do have an impact on next budget year. So there are a handful of Cal target adjustments that are being requested as part of the bump. So this is again when these are passed, if these are passed by council, the city economists will take this information and adjust the base budgets of the represented bureaus in the next year's budget as they prepare their budget for 1920. So we're looking at this item, the paper that says at the top, bump work session proposed current appropriation level targets. The total, let's see, so we'll start with, we'll just go in order. Included in this as directed by a budget note is increasing the Cal targets by $1 million each for the Portland Bureau of Transportation and Portland Parks and Recreation for compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Second is a long one that basically says that CBO will make Cal adjustments to account for the blended rate impact of 3 major projects that are occurring in the downtown corridor related to facilities and space in the Office of Management and Finance, and this has to do with the Portland Building Reconstruction Project, Space Optimization Project, and 4th on Montgomery Project, which was formerly known as the Jasmine Block. So we don't know the exact value of this, but these are all projects that council has already committed to. So the direction is essentially for CBO to make the adjustments as necessary in line with what was approved by council in earlier ordinances. The current estimate is around a $2 million impact of this CAL adjustment. Third is related, the third and the fourth one are both related to the procurement reorganization. And what the third one says is we're going to reduce the ongoing CAL appropriation of the procurement division by $1.4 million. This is the total pool of overhead funds. The actual general fund impact will be a return of around $670,000 to the general fund. This will be partially offset by increasing Parks CAL target on a one-time basis, but for 2 years, by $276,000, and this is meant to cover them, make them whole for the next 2 years while they figure out how to incorporate procurement costs, capital procurement costs into their capital plan. The fifth item is to reduce the revenue division's target by $1.9 million and increase the Office of Community Technologies budget by the same amount. So this reflects the relocation, the budgetary relocation of those two entities, facilitating the establishment of OCT as a standalone office, and then further increasing OCT's CAL target by $191,628 to support that permanent director position that is included in this bump. The sixth item is to increase the CAL target by $210,176 in the Portland Police Bureau for the increased compensation costs related to the Public Safety Support Specialist Program. It was realized once the actual HR work was done around creating those classifications that there wasn't sufficient funding to actually fund the positions that had been proposed. So this adjusts for that. Then finally, number 7, increase the CAL target by $73,101 in special appropriations for ongoing changes to the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, and this is related to that PSEP item that was in the bump for recommended practices such as transportation assistance and food and other recommended benefits of those folks. All right. So the second to last item is notable non-general fund changes. We just wanted to note for the record that there is a lot of other things that are happening in the city that are outside of the general fund. Most of the changes, there were 260 decision packages. Most of them were not general fund, and they were more technical in nature. Some changes that we thought we should note was that as the Bureau of Development Services continues their work on the POPS program, they're drawing $5.6 million from fund contingency for 4 POPS projects. They're making great progress on that work. The total for all projects for this fiscal year is about $10 million in operational expenses and $12 million including contingency. Transportation Operating Fund is creating, they're creating 14 new positions. They're allocating $1.2 million in non-general fund resources for those positions. The Portland Housing Bureau is reallocating $1 million in construction excise tax resources from affordable housing development to create a citywide down payment assistance loans for 10 households as part of the North-Northeast Neighborhood Housing Strategy. And then finally, the Water Fund contingency, they're adjusting the budgets of various capital projects, including large decreases primarily for Willamette River Crossing and the Washington Park projects, just to reflect updated timelines for those projects, those very large projects. Yes.
Housing one?
Yes.
$1 million, does that include FTEs, or is that just the down payment portion?
It's currently budgeted at approximately $100,000 for 10 households. And I think that reflects the number that the maximum number in interstate, which includes some funding for potential rehab costs. But that's the current number as far as I'm aware from the Housing Bureau, unless there's someone else here who would like to step in.
Okay. So the down payment assistance is really $100,000 for the down payments, because it doesn't read that way.
Up to $100,000.
$100,000 for times 10.
Okay, right. That's what I'm questioning. $100,000 in assistance. That's what you're allotting to a person. $100,000 in a down payment assistance. That seems an excessive amount.
And we can follow up with the Bureau to get you additional details on
Okay,
that
because
package. Rita.
I'm on East Portland. I don't, that 100,000 as a down payment is, in some of my houses in the neighborhood, is half the cost of the house.
So the average, in the region now, the typical home is depending on what statistics you look at, is about $350,000. This is assuming a 20% down payment and up to 100,000, so it wouldn't be 100,000 each. It could be, if the down payment was less, then they could stretch the dollar to affect more than 10 homeowners. One of my concerns about this program is we're serving so few people, but the bottom line is it is whatever the down payment assistance is per home, and it doesn't have to be 100,000. It could be less than that, depending on other financing. And of course, if someone has access to certain federal programs, you can do it with less than 20% down. But as you know, 20% down is the normal for home buying. So as I read this, no additional staff and up to 100,000.
So you're talking not FHA, you're talking conventional loans then? Because
I'm not the housing director, but
20% is usually a conventional loan. You have
Yes.
to put 20% down. FHA
Correct.
or VA is usually less, and that's why I'm kind of. I did home mortgages years ago, so I.
It's the ceiling, not the floor. Let's be
Yeah,
clear.
no, I understand that. It just seems like a high ceiling is what I'm saying.
So why don't we do this, since this is really a notification, let's make sure, the housing director unfortunately could not be here
Yeah,
this morning.
but get more
But
information on it.
Let's get some more information for everybody on that. And while I've got the microphone, the PCC Swan Island Training Center that Commissioner Fritz had mentioned, I'm happy to hold off on that until the budget process, unless I hear otherwise, that there's a critical, urgent, immediate need, and I'll get everybody more information on that as well.
Director Kennard, I want to go back to the general fund reconciliation for a second. What's the lesson, what's the takeaway on the timing of getting the money out the door for the Portland Gay Men's Chorus and the Creative Laureate? As you know, on the Creative Laureate side, that was a stipend, and so we're well into, her term of service, and would have liked to have had the stipend out the door. And of course, the Gay Men's Chorus was to help offset the cost of a trip, which has already occurred. So what's the takeaway in terms of how we can get the money out the door quicker?
That's a great question. I don't know the intricacies of the challenges that were incurred when in these particular instances. I do know that the size of our special appropriations department has grown significantly in recent years, and so I'd be interested in having further conversations with the grants division, who manages that, about the support that they need, if they need any additional support given the workload, how it's increased over the last few years.
Yeah, and I think we have to be also cognizant of the expectation once we've awarded the money in terms of the recipients and whatever we've represented in terms of the timeline for the money to be distributed. And since typically, not always, but typically there's a council champion for one or more of these things, I think maybe we can engage those offices to help get the proper paperwork pulled together so it comes to council so we can get approval, because this is typically done on consent.
Yep.
And I know there's a paperwork burden, but I'd like to see us be more timely in getting the special appropes out the door.
Okay, thank you. All right, so finally, the last piece of paper that I have to walk you through is just noting positional changes across the city. So there's a net change of 36.3 FTE through this proposed bump. That will increase our total authorized position count to 6,600 and almost 88 FTE. The largest changes, as you can see in this table, are with the Bureau of Transportation, which I noted earlier, and the Office of Community Technology becoming a standalone office. What you don't see here is obviously the fact that those staff from OCT are being moved from the Office of Management and Finance, and the growth in the Office of Management and Finance is really the procurement division and the work that they're trying to do there. All right, now I'd like to open it for any additional questions or items that council and our community budget advisors would like to discuss.
Yeah, I have a budget note that was prepared by the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability on something they were directed by council on light pollution. And they are recommending that this go through the normal budget process, that they've responded to the budget note, and now that it go through the normal budget process. And I guess in light of the mayor's desire to have a pretty robust reserve to cover some contingencies, we'll follow those rules and pursue this through the regular budget.
Okay.
I think it might be helpful when you bring the budget to council in public hearing to have a presentation about the Portland United Against Hate, so we can find out where are they at, what is the plan. This is one of the biggest single allocations proposed for them, so I would like to know, is it an expansion of the program? What are the results so far? Just where are we at?
Thank you.
With regard to the Gateway Center, I just want to remind people that there's the current request to make the transfer happen. I just want people to be aware there's an ongoing request. The county has agreed to take on the responsibility for Gateway, but in exchange for that, they're going to want us to help fund the transition over, is it a 5-year period, I believe? Just so people are aware of that. There will be a regular budgetary ask for that.
Great.
That'll come in the regular budget as an ongoing.
Correct.
Okay, great. So where we're at in the process is we are filing the mayor's proposed bump. Any changes can be brought via amendment to the proposed bump at the hearing next Wednesday. We are always available to assist with the construction of amendment language and facilitate that. So our office can will send out an email to council offices about any amendments that they're interested in having, and we're here obviously to answer any questions as well.
Well, if I could, I just, we're not here to make decisions today, but I will be looking to see if I can find support for an amendment to allocate $1 million on the Pittock project. And I think the record is now, I think, clear in terms of the urgency of that request. That would allow us to get started. I want to thank Mother Nature for giving us a kind of a wet day today, a stormy day, as sort of a reminder of what's to come. And we are concerned about, obviously, property owners that are below where the landslide is likely to occur. And then I appreciate you walking us through each of the general fund reconciliation pieces. I think there'll be some sidebar conversations just to test the waters on appetite for some changes. But I think the principle the mayor has articulated about putting aside some additional contingency because of the unknown exposure that we have is sound. But we've given ourselves, I think, enough room to make some discrete changes if it's the council's will. So we'll have those conversations. So thank you.
Commissioner, to be clear, are you proposing to reduce the contingency from 4 million to 3, or to reduce the transportation allocation from 4 to 3?
The latter.
That's what happens when you don't show up for the meeting, right? So I want to ask our budget advisors, or Kofi, if you have any thoughts. We also have a number of bureau directors in the room. I don't know if there's anything urgent that any of the bureau directors want to flag. All right, good. Thank you. Great presentation. I just have one weird request for future meetings, and maybe this is a sign that I'm actually getting to an age that's called mature. I'm not sure I live up to it. I find this document very hard to read.
Okay.
Could we do it in larger type going forward?
We are retiring our budget software, and so with that, we will retire that report. We will send it off into the night, and we will have an easier to read report in the new system.
I just want to confess to the whole world, my days of 9-point are behind me.
Oh, just wait until you get your cataracts done. It's a whole new lease on life. I want to thank the Budget Office for this presentation. And also to note that my office did not put in any new requests for ongoing things, nor did the Office of Equity and Human Rights. So I got some inkling of what other bureaus want in the regular budget process through their requests that may or may not be funded. I would like to have some conversations with my colleagues and with other bureau directors to find out what other things may be coming that people who followed the rules might not have been able to put on the table in this process.
Very good. Thank you, everybody.
Hey.
So in the future, I'll make sure she goes here.
Oh, okay.
We made a reference to the grants office being larger or more. They've gotten more work, but they have not gotten
That's
more
what
people.
I intended to say, that the workload has increased.
Okay,
Yeah.
because the FTEs has not.
Yeah, no, I will make that clear. I'll send a follow-up, make that clear. My full intention was to say the workload of special appropriations, the budget for special appropriations has gone up, and the workload
As well as
has
the
gone up.
number of contracts that
Right,
they are in.
right, and that was fully what I intended to
I
convey.
figured, but
But I
know
will
what it's
clarify.
like.